I was a typical car salesman, working sometimes 7:30 in the morning till 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. After being made redundant from my job, I said to my wife, I'm not going back. I'm gonna do this. I used to work in hospitality, but with the current situation, I was prompted to look into different fields and where the society or the community need me the most.
Yeah, I was a PTI in the Royal Marines. I was in the Royal Marines for about 6 years. I came out, I've been out of there for about 8 years now, and in that time I've done personal training. I also set up my own residential boot camp, but with COVID and lockdown, unfortunately, I lost that business, so I fancy a total change now.
For the past 7 years, I've been working in accounts for a financial services company, and I'm a part-time bookkeeper with them. But it wasn't something that I always felt, oh, I love this. This is so life-giving, life-enhancing. And it was my brother who said to me about a couple of years ago, Sam, would you not ever think about doing classroom assistant work?
The skills from the military transfer to this very well. I find it very similar with the communication and the hierarchy, and I find the seriousness of it and the safety implications very similar also.
Education and finance are very different, sectors or whatever, but the skills that I had as a bookkeeper, even in terms of organisation, using photocopier, filing, all those go into admin in school, and actually that sense of being organised and knowing what's what is a real strength to the classroom and a real strength to the teacher.
My previous qualifications in hospitality play a significant role in me performing my duties as an adult social carer. Customer service, communication, being able to someone, having the confidence to sell a car, I suppose, is going to take me through to having the confidence to be able to give someone a good service in terms of finding out what haircut they want and what style they want. And I'm not going to look back. I go to work loving work. It doesn't feel like work, which feels a bit of a cheap thing to say. Yeah, really positive. I can't wait for the future.
I find I've got a little bit back of what I lost, and the camaraderie and the work ethic, and I'm just loving it.
Brilliant.
They tell their stories, they make you laugh. They also have a spark in life that is contagious, and they make you happy as well. It's really good to be doing this job.
I probably feel happier about my future than I ever have done. It's just taken me till I'm 42 to do it.
Well, good morning, and thank you everyone for coming today, and welcome to this webinar titled, quite deliberately, Act Now. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kirstie Donnelly and I'm the CEO of City and Guilds Group. Today, we'll be debating all the issues associated with the current and growing joblessness crisis and the impact not just on young people, but also, as you just saw in those short video stories, literally millions of adults too. Given the Prime Minister's announcements over the weekend, re-lockdown, as necessary as they are disappointing, gives us even more reason to act now, both nationally, but also, as we discovered during our regional roadshows over the late summer, the need for local action and freedoms to deploy skills and training at a devolved level and help stem the joblessness impact we are facing. There is a chat function for you today. I'm sure it's going to raise lots of interesting issues and debates. Please feel free to use it. Despite the prospect of a lockdown for the next 4 weeks, education and training stays open for business. Therefore, along with schools, colleges and universities, and this must include workplace training and delivery too, because just as we saw in those videos, they act as a very real and powerful reminder as to why we're here and united in the job we have to do. All these people facing the dark pit of being out without a job deserve our help and support, and we have to throw every piece of arsenal at the challenge, be that how we augment funding or join up approaches to linking skills delivery into jobs at local levels in local communities. So today we'll be discussing one of the most important issues of a generation. How do we ensure that millions of people who might be now joining the employment lines, and especially by the end of the year, are quickly redirected back into meaningful work? Therefore, with that in mind, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our very special guest and keynote speaker joining us here today. It's not every Monday morning at the start of November you get two skills ministers in a virtual room, but I'm delighted today that not only do we have the former Minister for Apprenticeship and Skills, the Right Honourable Anne Milton, who you'll be hearing lots more from later, but also in the room we have the current Minister for Apprenticeship and Skills, Gillian Keegan. Minister, thank you for joining us today. I know we've only got you for a very short time slot, so huge appreciation for taking the time to be with us. And I've no doubt you're going to share some insights and views on the government's commitment to tackling this huge challenge. Gillian, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks, Kirstie, for that intro. And I mean, thank you for inviting me to come and speak to the conference. And of course, the fact that this conference is virtual is kind of indicative of the challenges we face. I do hope my technology stays of a good level. It's not always, and you know, these are just everyday challenges we now have to overcome. But it is a very important time to be having this conference. I mean, you know, Let's Get Britain Working Again is the title. And, you know, this is even more important. As you say, we unfortunately did have to make, or the Prime Minister had to make the announcement that there'll be a further lockdown, but of course, very importantly, keeping all education and training settings open so that people get the vital skills. And we know that this, you know, this is absolutely key now, not only for the young people in education, adults in education, but for people who will need to think about skills and what skills they have and what skills they need to enable them to, well, to weather this storm. And there's no doubt that we're going to have economic disruption. That's why the Chancellor put in place unprecedented package of measures to try and protect businesses and jobs. But as Rishi said, unfortunately, it won't be possible to save every job. And as well as furlough, our efforts have been on making sure that people do have that opportunity to gain more skills, to upskill so that they can find new and better jobs. And, you know, it's clear to us that we've had, before the pandemic, we had massive skill shortages in many sectors. I mean, you and I spoke about this, Kirstie, I think within my first couple of weeks, where we were looking at construction, at engineering, at anything to do with nursing and social care and teaching, and I mean, engineering, science, lab technicians, you know, look how much more, many more of them we need. So we do have this kind of very unusual and uneven landscape that we're dealing with, because we've gone from almost full employment to what will be higher levels of unemployment. And we've gone from skills gaps that we thought we had a bit of time to try and overcome in some areas, and that's been accelerated as well. So obviously for the past 6 months, we've been working on, you know, an unprecedented set of measures to equip people with the skills they need to get into work or get back into work. And that's, you know, we started obviously in April. The first thing we did when the first lockdown was announced in March was, what can we do quickly? What can we do to help people who are on furlough, may have a little bit of extra time, that do need some of these additional skills? And that was really the start of the skills toolkit, which was really just something that we could sort of put together quite quickly. And at the time, we were just working with businesses that were offering various courses, and we put them together. We made sure that they were of the right quality. And that's been a real success. It's an online platform. It provides free digital and numeracy courses and employability courses as well. And as of the end of September, we had 98,000 course starts. One of those is me. 16,000 course completions. I'm afraid to say one of those is not me. And 1.1 million page views, which, you know, it's something that people have basically said, you know, if I can get some of these skills that employers say are in high demand in the workplace, and it was loads of tech employers mostly, then that'll be a differentiator for me. I'll be able to say, you know, this is what I did during furlough, and I managed to get some more strings to my bow. Of course, on top of that, we then had to go much further. That we do have about nearly 80 courses on the skills toolkit now, but of course that's not going to be enough. So we also had the skills recovery package, which was announced in July by the Chancellor, and that was a plan for jobs to basically really focused on youth employment. We know in any economic recession, it always has been the case that youth employment is the first thing that's because people don't move, they tend to stay in jobs. Openings, there's uncertainty, and openings don't appear, and it's young people who obviously need those openings. So it's always the case. So we were specifically targeted on young people. Obviously, apprenticeships are key to recovery. The brilliant thing about apprenticeships, we all know, we all love apprenticeships, but the brilliant thing about apprenticeships is you're working and contributing quite quickly into the workplace. Not 100%, because obviously you're training as well, but you are there and you are making a difference to our national recovery as well. So that was where we put obviously incentives in place for employers. £2,000 for younger apprentices and £1,500 for older apprentices, which, to be honest, is the first time we've had incentives for older apprentices. But we didn't want to, like your video showed, we didn't want to exclude people from using this route if they were older in life, to basically get to a place that they'd always wanted to do, or they thought that they had a real interest in and maybe some transferable skills. So that was really why we had both of those in place. Traineeships, which can be used as a pre-apprenticeship, we've obviously made them much more widely available, and we also introduced a new classroom-based study, which was, it's about £101 million investment to support 18 and 19-year-olds who potentially would have tried to go into the workplace, but we didn't find those options available, so that they could take courses which are aligned with actually the areas where we've got massive shortages, and there is a lot of need for more people. So we've also done more on the National Careers Service, advising people where there are shortages, what type of jobs are available. It's still something that we know is a huge challenge, knowing what you want to do, knowing what's available, knowing where the local openings are, etc., is still something that you say time and time again, but it's very difficult to fix that. So we've really tried to focus, put more effort into that area as well. We know that we've obviously got Kickstart and the sector-based work academies as well, which will provide various incentives for various people to get into work, and they are supposed to work together. So we're working with the DWP, anybody who goes on a Kickstart, to try and turn that into an apprenticeship if we can afterwards. Then, of course, we had the Prime Minister's announcement about adult retraining, so that was largely focused on young people, and really to sort of say, this is accelerated. We knew that there were skill shortages, and we knew that there was going to be a change in our workplace, and this of course has accelerated everything digital and everything online. And as you saw again in your video, redundancy can often be a trigger for thinking, what is it I want to do with the next phase of my life? We don't have a job for life, we do have a life of jobs, we know that. What is going to be my sort of second or third job or career, and how do I get there? And that's why the Prime Minister announced further measures focused on really supporting adults to make that journey. And the Lifetime Skills Guarantee will give people who've missed out on opportunities, or they've gone down a different path and want to try something else, or they realise that the roles and jobs they were in, that they're not going to be as plentiful in that sector, and they've got other opportunities if they can get the chance to retrain. So this was really focused on supporting more adults to get level 3 qualifications by fully funding the first level 3, and obviously providing support to providers so that the provision will be there, and obviously we have to monitor the demand, because that's always a question as well, and we know that what is going to make people want to go back into study. And some of the things that we've learned on the Get Help to Retrain, a national retraining scheme that we had already, is that trigger to motivate somebody to learn or to feel confident enough to overcome what barriers they perceive they may have, or what means that they're going to actually sign up either to do a full-time course or another type of course is important. And we have learned a lot, so we're really trying to also introduce a lot more flexible provision, and make it clearer. If I can start here, this is where I can get to. Make that much clearer, that journey, so people really understand it. So we've obviously got digital boot camps which have been available and piloted, which are 12 to 16 week boot camps, and they've been available in a number of places, and we're going to expand the number of places that they will be available in early 2021. So we're going to add Leeds City region, heart of the Southwest Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire to the ones that were already there in the West Midlands, Greater Manchester, Lancashire and Liverpool City region. But we're also intending to take that concept and expand it across the country from spring, and also to look at other sectors that this kind of technical skills training could be really useful for, to get people very quickly moved over from one to another. The lifelong learning entitlement is really the ability to access the loans, which again will be flexible and consumable in a way that perhaps reduces the risk in investing in yourself. And that will be, we're going to consult on how we do that, but that's really to make sure that people can go and study modular and in a much more flexible way, but to levels 4 and 5, which used to be very often the case, and certainly that was my own route. You know, you do your level 2, then you do your level 4, and then you go on and do your level 5 or 6, and you know that has been something that we've noticed a drop off, and we really want to focus on rebuilding our technical skills offer. And of course we've also announced that we will, on top of all this, and luckily actually we had the National Skills Fund, which was already announced in a way and has enabled us to see much more clearly what's in front of us and what we should do with that. So we've had to really react a lot quicker. It's been clear for some time as well, and we all know this, and you guys know this more than anyone, that technical education, we need to improve not only the prestige, not only the brand, but actually the education itself. Things have changed in the world. The technology shifts have been quite profound in certain industries. So you know, this shift to move to, you know, employer-led standards and occupational maps as an underpinning for our qualifications is also something that's given us a lot more confidence to invest more heavily in this area. So we have seen, and I'm very proud of this, and takes great credit for this, which is the rollout of T-levels, which obviously Anne was very instrumental in, as well as everything else in terms of apprenticeship reform. But you know, to actually be able to introduce those in the middle of a global pandemic really was quite challenging for those involved. However, it had to be done. It represents the biggest reform of post-16 education since A-levels, and we've been waiting too long for this. So 70 years since we last looked at these qualifications. And I just want to share a story with you, because I was at a recent college visit, and a new T-level student said to me, you know, when I looked at the prospectus and I heard about this in my school assembly, I thought, this is too good to be true. He said, I'm now in my 7 weeks and it's like even better than I expected. It is unbelievable. I'm really, really loving the course. I feel like I'm learning so much already. And when you see the T-level students, they're the most excited set of students that most people have ever come across, because they really are getting a superior experience, and they know that. So as well as that, we want to enable people to get to the higher levels. We know that that's where you get more options in terms of jobs and roles, and you get paid a lot more, and it's quite important to help people get to those higher levels. So the Institute of Technology, the £290 million investment in capital funding to make sure they're all across the country is very important as well. And the Wave 2 competition has just been announced, so that those areas that don't have one are putting together their bids now. And this is where the colleges work with the further education, higher education institutes, as well as local employers, and they really put together a strong, solid bid. So I'm looking forward to those. So the timing of this conference, and I'm sure there'll be many others where we really, you know, there's never been a more important time for government to focus on this, for us to work closely together because of the speed of change that we're all dealing with, to make sure that we give opportunities to people of all ages, all backgrounds, and to get the education skills that they need to support the rebuilding of our businesses and industry, and also to move to some of those areas that were going to happen anyway, but to do that more quickly. So I hope you recognise that the measures that we have introduced obviously have been really focused on trying to do that, and there'll be more to come. And obviously we're really focused on trying to make that comprehensive package of support there, all ages, to get trained, get into employment in different ways, in different provision, flexible, modular, and all of the things that we can do to really help individuals and to help get Britain working again.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That was a really, really superb and a helpful reminder, actually, of all the things that have been happening since we've found ourselves in COVID. And as you say, a lot of, I mean, it was great to hear about the 98,000 people who've already sort of taken up the opportunity to use the toolkit. Really pleased to hear you talk about flexible provision. You talked about that a number of times, and I think that's going to be very much a theme of what we're talking about today, as well as though flexible provision needed to be devolved down to the region so it can be flexible and also local. And I really love the term life of jobs. I think that's a new one, but I think we'll definitely be using that, because I think it is exactly true of the situation we find ourselves in. Thank you very much for being with us today, Minister. It's really great to. I don't know if you're staying with us, but if you are, please feel free. We're going to move on to the next.
I stay for 7 minutes, Kirstie. So I'll listen to the next bit. So I think I've got 7 minutes. So I shall use the time, and also I'll keep an eye on the chat as well.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Gillian. That was great. So let's move on now very quickly. Just going to flash up the agenda for the rest of this morning. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we need to do a little bit of time catch up. But there you can see what's coming up for the rest of our time together. In a moment, we're going to be moving straight into the panel debate. I'm just going to have a very quick conversation with Anne, because Anne has been on this journey with me throughout the late summer, traveling the regions, haven't we, Anne? We've had a great time visiting the 6 regions that sort of culminated into the Act Now report that we're launching here today, and I'll be saying a little bit more about later. So Anne, let's just sort of come to you really before we move into your panel. As I said, we spent the summer together traveling around the regions, really hearing a lot of what Gillian was just talking about, but how is it really impacting on the ground? And I know that you were often equally heartened as you were disheartened in equal measure about some of the lack of discourse or connection between local and national government. But I just thought you might want to draw out from the 6 visits that we did, what from your perspective is the reason why we need to really act now, and what do you think were the key takeaways from the regional roadshows that we had?
I think that the key thing is how critical and urgent this is. So anything that is happening next spring is way too far away. There was frustration. I mean, there are certain things that came up over and over again. Frustration about the gap between central and local government. And we're going to talk about this more in the panel. But the real strong feeling that the best solutions are bottom up, not top down. The national economy is actually just a conglomeration of lots of local economies, and local, particularly the elected representatives, know their local area and they know the business. And so there's a real cry for bottom up solutions, more trust in the organisations locally to spend money that central government gives them wisely. But definitely the urgency, the Act Now message was very, very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to be a theme now, and the whole theme of devolution and how much can actually happen on the ground. And I mean, we saw some great examples, didn't we, Anne, of things that were already happening, but it's how we can actually take those to scale and also, as you said, devolve more of that local decision making and have that sort of grassroots approach, which is why it was very heartening to hear Gillian talk about the recognition of government of needing more flexible provision. So on that note, I wonder whether it's a really good time to put up your panellists for this morning, Anne.
Yes.
And we'll start with our first, you chairing our first panel on skills and policy. I think your panellists are coming up now. You can see them all there. And I'm going to hand over the reins to you. And I know for the next 20 minutes, you're going to have a great conversation with these expert panellists.
Yes, lovely. And welcome to our panellists. Thank you for giving up your time today to be with us. So we've got, I think what's easiest, if I just ask you to introduce yourselves briefly, if we start with Michelle.
Hi, thanks, Anne. I'm Michelle Coleman-Bora, and I'm the Assistant Director for Skills and Employment at the Greater London Authority.
And then Anne.
Hi, I'm Anne Bamford, and I'm Strategic Director of Education and Skills at the City of London Corporation.
Then we've got Rashik. Rashik, you're on mute. I get people to introduce themselves so everybody can unmute.
Hi, it's Rashid Palmer. My day job is I'm the Chief Technology Officer for IBM in Europe, but I also chair the Employment Skills Panel for Lead Cities in Lab.
Lovely. And then finally, Rob.
Rob Tabb, I'm the policy lead for employment and skills within Liverpool City Region.
Lovely. If the panelists do please leave your audio on, we've got a pretty straightforward question, and we touched a little bit on it with my discussion with Kirstie. That is, what should the balance be between local versus national governments in how we get Britain back to work and how we reskill the people that need to? And I'm going to leave this pretty open and ask one of you to pop in first time. Maybe Rashid, you would like to start us off.
Sure. So we've been doing a lot of work in the Future Skills Commission, where we looked at this topic in a lot of detail. And I think there's clearly need for clarity on what are the standards that we expect and what are the expectations that people should have as a citizen in the UK. But then also very clear connections between the implementation of those standards and how they get delivered in the local marketplace. So if I look at what we've been doing with a range of the programs in the LEP and in the wider combined authority, we've been looking at how do we make some of those connections happen, and how do we get employers to work with us. Sometimes it's employer bodies rather than employers directly, and I think there's a lot of good things there, but the challenge is that when central government starts to expand its scope beyond the policy piece and not providing the flexibility at the local level to be able to make some of the trade-offs and balances in how we use the funds. Often the monies are provided with very clear straitjackets, and you can't use it in different ways. You know there's problems over there which you'd like to use it for, but you can't. So I think it's the ability to have local implementations, but obviously clarity on the global standards, the national standards that we want to adhere to.
Fabulous. I saw you nodding, Anne.
Yes, very much so. I couldn't agree more, Rashid, because I talk about growing the dots and joining the dots, because I think we have good quality provision that's available at the local level in a range of formats. And I appreciated the Minister talking about the importance of flexibility and having different locations to learn. I think that what we are sometimes lacking is the overarching vision and how to join up those dots. So in other words, how to curate and communicate the offer in a way that's widely accessible to people, because sometimes there are many opportunities, but unless you're able to enable people to see their lifelong learning journey through those opportunities, I think that's where there's a real need for that connection between, yes, national standards, national vision, even international, because these skills need to transfer across the broad, global context. But how then at a local level, we can curate that offer so it is a meaningful offer to the people at the local level. I think communication is very key, particularly when you look at a very changing, a skills market that's very complicated. So parents don't understand apprenticeships. They don't understand the connection. Someone who's perhaps not unemployed, but underemployed in a company working for themselves, how do they get the skills? I think there's an important piece of work that needs to be done at the local level about joining those offers up, quality assuring, making sure that they are all good offers. And I think then at the national picture, if we focus on vision and aim and standards, we do also have to think about assessment and accreditation, because if people are going to be learning more flexibly, we need to make sure that the learning they're doing has a currency in whatever their next steps of learning are. So we need to look at that whole piece around accreditation. So basically, I think the words for me are about communication, joining it up, making it accessible, making sure it's high quality, making sure we're able to accredit it in a way that makes sense when we're talking to each other or transferring those qualifications across different places, and then how we amplify what we do, so we actually draw attention to it and draw a light, shine a light on it so people know it's there.
Lovely, Anne, and I'm going to bring you in, Rob, because we had a really lively conference up in, well, I say I use the term loosely, up in Liverpool. I felt I was there anyway, Rob. So flexible national standards and communication are 3 themes. Rob, do you come in?
The one word I'd add to that is the coherence, and I think that's something that we can do in local areas, recognizing that there will be, there will be some national programs that government deliver, and that's entirely right and appropriate in all of this. There will be some local things that we will deliver depending on what our specific local issues are, what our local challenges are, what employers locally are telling us, but recognising both Anne and Rashik's point there about looking nationally and globally in all of this. But then there's a gap there, and there's a question about how we bring all of those together. Anne's point about communicating the offers that are available clearly in a way that we can all understand, I think is absolutely right. Many of us have been involved in employment skills policy for a number of years, and I think every year I set out to simplify the skills funding system, and I suspect that every year I make it slightly more complicated. But I think that might be one of those things that we just need to continue to work on. But I think that the point, you think about digital skills, and I know the report that the Act Now report talks about the importance of digital skills, but there's also, for me, there's a nuance within that as to whilst there are some digital skills that we all need to have, there's also a question about what are the digital skills we need to have locally. It's no surprise that within Liverpool region, we've got more people doing JavaScript development, but that's because we've got a big creative sector who need it for website design. It's entirely linked to the local economy. From a national program, that sort of nuance wouldn't get picked up, and it's only at a local level that you'd get that. So I think the coherence and the flexibility, but I think critically the responsiveness as well. And I think the speed to be able to respond quickly to what employers are asking for and to put things in place is absolutely critical. And that's the same for us as funders, but then also for colleges, independent training providers, schools, sixth form colleges, universities as well. I think we all need to look at how we can be more responsive in that.
Lovely. Michelle, it's always hard being last because everybody said maybe what you were going to say. But actually just focusing down on what do you actually want from central government?
So I think that's a twofold question. So I think one of the things that the Metro mayors in particular have been asking for is that kind of longer funding settlement, which will enable us to plan over a longer period of time. We lurch from year to year. So those of us that are currently in that planning cycle, we're looking at 3 years as we stand now. We're not sure what our settlement is for next year, and we're trying to work that through. So I think that longer term funding settlement for the devolved areas would be really welcomed and would enable us to manage things much better. I think the other thing is that recognition, or there's probably 3 points. One is the recognition that we're really key partners in all of the activity that takes place. So we're not necessarily the people you come to last, we're the people you come to first to really talk about how do we integrate, how do we make these national schemes work in local areas. Rob and I are constantly in calls with each other where we talk about the differences between London and Liverpool. And there are significant differences, but we can all deliver a national programme in our local areas and maximise that if we're given that opportunity. And then I think the third thing that is coming through very clearly at the moment is the National Skills Fund that's been announced. It's really welcomed, but the ability for that to be sort of delegated to local areas to join it up with the other parts that we already have, so the adult education budget, the European social funds, all of these other things to create that coherent package for our local areas would be incredibly welcomed from government. And I think probably the important thing I was going to say is it's great working with national government who provide a framework for us. I think the local areas have the ability to implement that framework, perhaps in slightly different ways, but to make it more impactful to the local areas.
So the flexibility that Rashik, you particularly talked about within a national framework.
Yeah, so I think we've already shown that. Sorry, just to come in a little bit. On the adult education budget through the pandemic, the local areas moved much quicker than central government because we have that ability to be more agile. In London, for example, we've already introduced level 3 qualifications, fully funding level 3 qualifications. I think in Liverpool the same. We've introduced unitisation fully funded because we were able to move much quicker. So I think that's something that, our offer to government, I suppose.
So I was going to mention the adult education, devolution of the adult education budget, which was an important first step, really. It's quite interesting, Michelle, you saying that actually you were ahead of the government on level 3 qualifications.
Yep.
So really innovative. Rob, what do you feel? What are your experience of the adult education budget in Liverpool?
Again, I think this is an example of where things like national entitlements at level 2, I think that is a really good thing that we see at a national level. I completely understand that government would do that. I think there's a question about how we respond to it locally and to have that flexibility and responsiveness, and that's fine. We've done some test and learns, particularly around English, maths, digital, and around ESOL development, because we think those are critically important to have some of that flexibility. To say, actually, how do we do some of these things to give our colleges and our training providers a bit more flexibility to be able to do that, and we're looking forward to seeing the results of that. I think we also increase the minimum, the wage rate at which you could access free training up to real living wage for that, and to try and broaden the pool of people who are able to respond to this. I think that challenge about how do you listen to employers, how do you get that impartial view from employers, and that clear, consistent view as to what those skills are that employers are asking for, and get that communicated and embedded within local curricula, I think remains a consistent challenge for us. Rashid's talked about the work that West Yorkshire have done on the Future Ready Skills Commission. I think it's an important piece of work for us all to look at nationally. Clearly, it's going to be, we'll have some different views and different focus locally, but there are important trends in there, I think. And again, it was something you were, I think, quite passionate about as Skills Minister, and was that notion of careers education and getting careers education, information, advice and guidance right, having that line of sight through to opportunities as well, and enabling individuals to have that choice in that.
If I could just, I was just going to ask you to come in, Rashik, actually.
Yeah, if I can just build on what Rob was saying there. I think there's a couple of things which are really key. If you look at the report, you'll see there's 10 recommendations. And one of the key recommendations is around that close coupling between the employers and the education providers. Because often the learners, whatever age, they're not necessarily aware of some of the opportunities that exist in the region. And it's actually the employers that can make those opportunities much better known to the right people at the right time. And so having a clear structure, I mean, UTCs have been quite good at helping create some of that structure. We've got the PTEC program in Leeds as well, which is looking at a similar kind of thing for digital. So having a kind of organizational construct around the right industries that the region wants to focus on, having the employers working with you on what should be the skills agenda, how do we curate the global agenda and global or national agenda in a local form, which makes sense, and then making sure that the learning providers have a pathway. And I think what Anne was saying around and Michelle as well on making sure we have the longevity of funding is also important. I don't think that's just necessarily a governmental thing. This is a system design which needs both employers and government needs to help us with, because this is, as we said, it's not just a schools issue. This is a learning for life, and we need to have that structure in place. And I can give you many examples in the region where we've had shifts of career. Someone saying, I was one of these, you saw that video earlier, I've come out of the army, I'm going to do this new job, or I was a clerical assistant in this place, I've moved to a completely new role. And that career transition, we refer to it as reboot. How do you reboot your career into something different? Yeah. And it's helping people realize that actually in today's environment, you can almost do any job and you can have a global impact. It's the democratization that's happened through technology, through the pandemic, means that you can do a wide range of things. It's actually having that confidence that you can go do it.
Lovely, Rashid. We've got 4 minutes left. So on that subject, I come to Anne first. I'm going to make you Secretary of State for Education Skills today. And you've got 45 seconds to tell me what change would you bring in, Anne?
Okay, so picking up on Rashik's point really is we've done a lot of work looking at these idea of fusion skills, which are the 12 skills most wanted by employers that are able to be transferred into whichever way you're working. Because I think this notion, when I talk to young people now, and they don't say, you know, if I say, what are you going to do in the future? They don't name a job. They use a whole series of verbs to describe the sort of things they want to do. And even if you're in a job, the job is likely to considerably change. So first thing I would do would be whatever the course, wherever it's delivered, that it focuses around fusion skills. Okay. The second thing I do is if I use my 45 seconds, I'll stop then.
45 seconds, Anne.
That's it.
What's the first thing you would do?
Sorry, was that me? I couldn't hear. Okay, so the first thing, I was just thinking about that. I wonder if I would start to amalgamate all the funding streams. For me, it just becomes so complicated. We have apprentices, we have adult education budget, we have, you know, on and on and on. Actually, the main aim is to re-skill people. So if we allow people to have that choice and they're not constrained by the different funding streams and the different funding pots, surely that would be more supported. Obviously, the second thing I would do is devolve.
No, you're not allowed a second thing. You're only allowed a first thing, otherwise we'll overrun our time. I will come and be your Minister of State to implement that. I agree.
Michelle, you said my second thing, so I'm really pleased anyway.
Rob?
I would give long-term funding certainty for devolution, devolving money to local areas, and will guarantee for 3 or 4 or 5 years not to make any more changes to funding policy.
Yes, yes, that. Rashik, you're on mute. Lovely.
I would just implement the 10 recommendations of the paper.
Of course. So a big cry for flexibility, certainty on funding, and a cry for devolution. Local areas, local employers know best what to do. Is I think the thing that has come out of this. But simplification, and I would just finish by saying, I Google searched the word jobs. I thought to myself, if I was just lost my job or thought I might, I will Google search jobs, wouldn't I? I wouldn't Google search careers, because careers is a very middle class sort of concept, really. Most people don't think of life in terms of that. And it takes a long time to get anything that is anything to do with careers or what I should do next, actually, or training. It's just worth a go. But can I thank all the panelists, really? Your input has been really useful. And thank you for your time. Do stay on a bit if you can. It would be great to see you stay with us for a bit. And so over to Kirstie.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, panelists. Wow, what a great panel. We knew we would get underneath all the issues, didn't we, Anne? And we've done that. You've done that expertly and repeated very quickly too. Thank you. I mean, I think the things that really stuck out for me there were about this coherence and the amalgamation, how we augment what's already out there. I mean, the great thing about what we're hearing today and what's in our report is we're not per se looking for anything that's new. We're just looking for working more in partnership to augment and create greater coherence and allow it to happen much more at a local devolved level where we know we can get out to the most hardest needed areas. So and great to hear that support for the report as well. So thank you, panelists. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on and have a very quick economics view, actually, from Andy Durman, just joined us from MZ, and Andy's going to do one of his expert tour de force of the labour market in 5 minutes flat, because what we've just heard there from Anne and her panellists is obviously the skills policies, interventions, and in a moment we're going to move on to the employer, so almost supply meets demand, but in the middle of all of this is what is happening in the labour market. So Andy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kirstie. Really interesting session. I think reinforces a lot of what I'm going to run through very quickly here. So 3 key trends to share that are probably not now particularly fresh and new, but important. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So first challenge, of course, is the unemployment challenge. We've seen unemployment rising quite considerably, particularly from lockdown, what is now lockdown 1.0, presumably, and in March, and that rise certainly from January up to end of August was over 100%, 124% rise in claimant count. So claimant count gives us a good early indicator. It's not the official unemployment statistics, but it does give us a good early sight. The unemployment statistics do have a bit of a lag in them, and as we've been traveling around the country, we've been plotting this data and seeing an overarching similar trend, of course, but quite significant variations in volumes and rates associated. So London really jumps out. The orange bar line on that chart really jumps out as starting from a relatively high base. It is a big economy after all, but has leapt quite considerably, over 160% from January up, so significantly above that national average. Some of those areas that were starting with a smaller base have shown slightly slower increases there. So that gives us an early sense of where the challenge lies and how it's not evenly distributed, although there is, of course, a challenge across the whole piece. If we move to the next slide now, the flip side of that, of course, is looking at where opportunity might be re-emerging. So we know there's a challenge as the economy contracts, but what we haven't seen necessarily is the death of our economy. It's just shifting and changing. So, of course, during that period leading into lockdown and through, the hiring market did slow down quite considerably. We saw nationally a 30% drop in posting activity between February and June, but actually as things started to kind of settle down, what we have seen is a re-emergence of hiring activity, notably from July up to September and nationally up around 23%. But again, that pattern has varied, and I'd say London and the Southeast have been particularly sluggish in that re-emergence. Other areas have picked up fairly rapidly in that time. And as we dig in and go on to the next slide, as we dig into that activity, it's really interesting to start to see what roles are really driving that return. So looking between June and September, a big increase in aspects of the economy that are helping us adapt to the new normal. So think about logistics, think about the move to e-commerce and online purchasing, or the move to even greater elements of that. Of course, we've seen significant strength and growth in the healthcare sector as it works on the front line here, but also very notable that it's that mid to high skilled end of the labor market that has seen significant growth and actually has remained relatively strong throughout this period. So quite a shift happening towards those sectors that can accommodate remote working and are fueling the knowledge end of our economy. If we move on to the third dimension, is looking at furlough, which is obviously has been rebooted and refreshed over the weekend, but certainly poring over the data up to the end of July, what that did flag to us is those aspects of the economy that have clearly faced the greatest disruption during the period. I think furlough across the whole original period have seen over 9 million employments, taking advantage of that, around about, pushing towards a third of our employed workforce there. But again, we can see there's clearly not an even mix of take up, accommodation, food services, arts and entertainment, construction very much in the early phases, but fell back relatively quickly there. Whereas we of course have protected some of our kind of key worker sectors down towards the bottom, and those that have been able to adapt to more online and remote working. And if we go through to then our final slide, looking at furlough, but thinking about it in regional terms, again, just backing up, I think, the conversation we had there just there in the panel session. Whilst, of course, we have a national challenge that does vary quite considerably regionally, London in particular has seen significant take up of furlough. Again, big economy, but almost a third of employment's taken up there. Southeast, less so in rate terms, but the volumes are high. So we can see some variations there. And a lot of this really is driven by the underlying makeup of these local economies. London, for example, whilst yes, it has a strong digital and tech sector, etc., also has significant employment supporting that in retail, in leisure, in the arts, and therefore feeling the pain quite considerably in those elements. And it's that furlough sector data, I think, gives us clues as now we head into lockdown 2 and what might the future look like. I mentioned construction was one of those areas that saw significant uptake, but actually if you look at the job posting activity, that really has re-emerged as the economy's woken up. And I believe the Prime Minister has certainly flagged that the construction sector should try and continue throughout this new phase of lockdown to kind of continue that growth. So I think we'll look at those sector profiles, and that will start to give us a clue as to where the pain remains and the challenge remains, both in terms of sectors, but probably more importantly, understanding the makeup of local economies and how the new rules will affect us there. So a quick walkthrough of just a few of the key highlights that we're seeing in the labour market.
Thanks as ever, Andy. As I say, always a tour de force when it comes to looking at the economic and labour market impacts, which is incredibly important, and actually really apt now to move into our next panel, because as Andy just illustrated there, really seeing those, and it was a theme throughout the road shows over the summer, this theme of seeing those mid to higher level seeing growth, whereas as we know, quite a lot of our regions impacted by the level of low skilled workforces. So how do we create those opportunities and aspirations to help that levelling up agenda? So with that in mind, we're now going to move over to our final panelist session, chaired by Anthony Impey, the CEO of Be the Business. And I think it will really give us the other side of the skills policy perspective that we were just hearing from Anne's panel, and really what is the role of employers in respect to the role they need to play, not only just building back their own organisations and businesses, but what they can do to help solve this problem on both a regional and national level. Anthony, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kirstie, and good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here, even in an environment of unwelcome news on Saturday. I think there is so much that can be done to help address some of these challenges, and I think this next panel discussion is going to address precisely that point. So I'd like to welcome my panelists. I'm joined this morning by Professor David Phoenix from London South Bank University, Martin Rimmer, Chief People Officer at Cadent Gas, Gary Wright, who is the Deputy Chief People Officer for North Tees and Hartlepool NHS, and Claire Handby from the Greater Manchester Chambers. Welcome all.
Morning. Morning, thank you.
Great. Everyone's there. Phew, that's a relief. I think I'm going to start off by asking you each to respond to this question that Kirstie has posed, which is, what should employers be doing now to reskill the nation? What's our responsibility as employers to reskill the nation? Claire, maybe I could start with you on that question. And could you just do a brief intro to yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Claire Handby, and I'm Employment Skills and Inclusion Policy Advisor for Greater Manchester Chamber. I reflected on this question before the panel, and I'd share that my lens is actually what is business doing when I share these reflections in terms of, when COVID lockdown was biting in April, the GM Chamber CEO said he wanted us to do and not only talk to help GM. So what has the Chamber been doing? Well, circa 5,000 SME and large scale businesses is who we partner with. We're seeing leaders and businesses staying stubbornly optimistic and being agile. Business circumstances, we're seeing leaders being as open and honest as they can be about where their business is at with their staff. Has the person got a future in the business, or should they be considering other options to action plan their own futures so that they can own their future and not not just be part of the company that they've worked for perhaps for many years. The skills bridge is super interesting. Strikes me as an excellent opportunity. Most leaders have fought to establish their business and want to help their workforce to see how they can pivot their transferable skills from working within a sector perhaps that was hot, and maybe in the short term it's not as hot, and so how do you help them? Keeping confident that the pandemic will pass, how to use their time productively. I've also seen people who are employed are seeing a pilot, for example, has pivoted to set up his own funeral director business, or a person who's done a HND is then exploring how to become chartered because of not having the opportunities to socialise as much as they could be doing. I've also seen a young lady stand outside Stockport Station and work out how to make her CV have a QR code so that people can scan her CV as they're walking onto the train. And actually that resulted in her landing her dream job, which it was the impact of LinkedIn, for example, that helped, that she posted how she'd gone about trying to change her own destiny. I've seen taxi drivers changing their cargo from people to products, as in food. So I just want to bring to this debate today that people are responding, and yes, it's very challenging, but there's some real examples of innovation and honesty in business to help the situation.
A really positive message, I think, as well, Claire. It is. These are unbelievably tough times if you're in business at the moment, and I too see these remarkable stories and see these remarkable images of businesses kind of responding, pivoting, changing their business in order to respond to the crisis. So there is hope out there, and businesses are staying focused on what, how to respond to this massive uncertainty and rapid change that we're all having to deal with. Could I come to you, Martin, and maybe you could introduce yourself and also kind of share your initial reflections on what employers should be doing to reskill the nation?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Martin Rimmer, and I'm the Chief People Officer for Cadent Gas, which is in fact the largest gas distribution company in the UK. We have around 5,300 employees, and interestingly enough, that number has changed by about 30% on last year. So throughout the pandemic, we've recruited circa to 1,250 people. We've continued our recruitment program, and we've continued to change our business model to a more direct employed business model. I think the important thing for all businesses at this moment in time is to produce a considered plan. I think what you find in organisations, and I've worked in these organisations, is that when the pressure's on, the first thing that gets cut back on is development, training, upskilling. Well, in Cadent, we're not in a position to do that because one of our overarching strategies is to prepare ourselves for green energy and the transition from natural gas into hydrogen gas. Means that we've got a huge requirement to upskill our existing workforce. So we're going to see the need for our current workforce upskilled into a completely different technical activity to be able to manage that transition into a different type of network. Now, that's over a number of years. But what we've had to do, and we've taken the opportunity within COVID and the lockdown period, is to spend time through different ways of working, Teams calls, to produce a 2-year people plan. And in that people plan, there are some significant commitments as a business to both our current employees and new employees. And without sounding like I'm dropping numbers in, but we have recruited 1,250 people. We're about to embark on recruiting about 90 graduates and new entrants. We're also focusing on the people we've got, and we've got 60 people who will go through our supervisor apprenticeship. Now, they're already employees within the business. So And the total cost of our upskilling programme for the next 12 months is going to be about £11 million. Now, it would be very easy for business during our current pandemic and the challenges that we've got to see that budget, really stripped back to the bare minimum. But I think that's what business has to commit to doing. It doesn't necessarily mean about the scale of what they do. I think it is the commitment to doing it. And if I may just in 30 seconds link into the previous element, the previous question, I think that's where the importance of government working more closely in a simplified, coherent way and offering support, not necessarily more support, as in more financial support, but the simplicity of that support. So every level, every size, scale of business is able to look at something, understand what is available, and seize that opportunity to support the plan that they make or the plans that they should develop, because the plan is the critical thing for me.
Sorry about that. I had some unmuting issues. Thank you for that, Martin. And really interesting to hear your reflections around that. And you're absolutely right. In times of economic downturns, the first thing that's very often that it's cut is training development. And amazing what you're doing at Cadent Gas. So. Thank you so much for that. Can I come to you now, Gary? And you are at I suppose, at the other end of the demand spectrum. The pandemic has created extraordinary pressures, I guess, on the work that you're doing in the NHS.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning. So I'm Gary Wright. I'm the Deputy Chief People Officer at North Tees and Hartlepool NHS Foundation Trust. Just to give a little bit of context, we have around 5,500 to 6,000 staff. We by far the largest employer in the area that we serve. Wide range of skills, some from professional backgrounds. We have a multi-site organisation delivering a wide range of different care. And as you've rightly pointed out, we're at a different end of COVID than many, so it's absolutely on our doorstep, and we're seeing significant pressures related to that. Just to reflect on the question, like all of the panelists will have done, I was thinking about this, and my opinion is that it needs to be, it sits under three main themes, my answer, which is around attracting, developing, and then retaining the staff that we've got. So first of all, we've got to attract staff. We're a large organisation, but we still got a turnover of about 7 or 8%. So although we're the largest employer, people retire, people move on, so with a turnover of 8 or 9%, it means we have job vacancies and job opportunities within our organisation. But we've got to be able to attract individuals. So, specifically around COVID, we've got to make sure that we create COVID-safe working environments. People are nervous about coming to hospitals and working in hospitals, so that's an important part. We've got to look at apprenticeships and making sure that we target hard to hit areas. The area we serve, for example, is high levels of deprivation. And with what comes with that is low levels of aspiration. So we've got to make sure that we work with local schools and communities and colleges to maximise people's ambition, to understand that actually with the right support, they can work in an organisation like ours and forge out a career for themselves. Which in sometimes second and third generation unemployed households. So that isn't as easy as it may sound. And also we've got to recognise around job crafting. So gone are the days where people work 37.5 hours a week, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That isn't the type of organisation we are. And people have commitments around childcare and caring responsibilities and various other things. And it's important that we make sure we attract people by changing our offer as well as an organisation. And then obviously, as we do it today, think about technology. Do people physically need to be here? Can we work differently? Something which we haven't done maybe so much in the past. Then just moving on very quickly to development. Once we've got them employed here, we've got to develop them, because we've got to maximise their potential. we've got to make sure that we understand their skills gap and the skills gap of the area, and really work to develop their skills so they'll want to stay with us. And that will avoid us having to import any talent. So we need to build a talent management process. Previously, we've had to import, for want of a better word, skills and registered nursing from the Philippines and Italy and various other places because we didn't have the skills around us. And then also we need to retain. So it's okay making jobs and developing them, but we've got to retain them. We've got to, and if somebody starts in one particular role, that doesn't mean that's their career forever. We can do that job crafting. We can make sure that we support individuals to have a career which might span many different opportunities within our organisation, building that transferable skills, thinking longer term.
Seems that Anthony's having some problems coming off mute. Well, we see, I'll just come in, Anthony, and try and get people to build on that really good summary there from Gary. I think David, you're
sorry, Kirstie, I'm back. Sorry about that. That was an anxious moment there. But thank you for jumping in. Thank you, Gary, for sharing that. And first of all, thank you for all the amazing work that you and the team and the NHS are doing at the moment. You're performing under extraordinary pressure, and I think I speak for everybody here when I say thank you very much for all your help. I think also it's very interesting kind of how you're approaching the, addressing the challenges, and how particularly I was struck by your comment about having to respond to the local skills challenges that you're having and filling the skills gap. So thank you very much for that, Gary, for your first thoughts. David, I'm going to come to you next. I'm not going to go off mute, so I apologise for any background noise. But I'm coming to you next. And just some of your reflections, a brief introduction, some of your reflections on what employers should be doing now to help reskill the nation, and maybe sort of some insights into what you're seeing in the London landscape as well. I'm just thinking about some of the things that Andy was saying in the MZ data about how London seems to be, feeling a lot of the major challenges of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. And certainly not the first person to have had some of the mute problems, I think. So I think we've all been there. I think very briefly, first of all, in terms of the employer role, I think Martin was right to focus on the question of investment. And as the report says, and I'm really pleased that we have got that report today, we've got only about 50% of the EU average being invested across the country by industry. So while some do a good job, in general, we don't do enough in the country. And I think we do need to promote that investment, especially post-COVID. And an area where we may be moving into a more challenging area in terms of recession. In terms of my role, I'm Vice Chancellor at London South Bank University, but I'm also CEO for an educational group. So I'm responsible for a MAT with an academy and a UTC, and a college, as well as a number of enterprise companies. So it's perhaps not surprising that when I look at how employers should be engaging and investing, I'm probably going to pick up on three areas. The first of which is one of partnership with the educational providers. And there's multiple educational providers within local and national areas. And we really need that investment to ensure that in terms of time, employers are working with providers to design the content and types of course they want. It's not all going to be about degrees in the future. We do need to grow level 4 and 5, and we need both of those areas to expand. But we also need more short courses, and we need actually to engage that 50% of learners that haven't got to level 4 and re-engage them with education. So getting employers to look at both the knowledge element to develop lifelong learning ability and the skills element to help the individual and to drive the business is going to be key in curriculum design. In addition, I think Gary articulated it really well. In looking at those curriculum design, we need employers to innovate and to recognise that it's not just about new starters, it's about reskilling existing workforce. We know that AI is putting about 10 to 12% of jobs at risk in the near future. There's about another 30% that are at medium risk of AI changes. As was discussed earlier, we've got new innovations around sustainability. So employers need to be looking not just at entry-level support, but at reskilling. And if employers really want people to be able to drive their business and to help them innovate, as I said earlier, they've got to be involved in developing their qualification and supporting work-based learning as well as off-site learning. And the final thing I would say is that employers need to do when they're looking at the investment is curriculum design, innovation and reskilling, and support. That's the final one. People do need guidance, as was said earlier. You don't always need to go. You don't know where to go. You don't know what you don't know. So employers need to be looking at the skills they need and communicating with staff and potential employees to explain what opportunities people should be pursuing. And they need to think about how they're going to provide that support. So, you know, as an example, we worked with a number of employers where they were really keen on providing opportunity for young people, 16 to 19-year-olds, but they were aware that the environment they needed had to be much more structured. So we're working with those employers and IUTC to provide a much more structured environment around some level 4 and apprenticeship provision to help them move forward. So that support environment is about guidance, but it's about working with people as individuals as well. And I think if with educational establishments and employers, we can bring those three things together around curriculum design, reskilling and support, then I think we will be able to make good progress in any post-COVID, post-Brexit world and actually get back on the front foot. In terms of the work in London, there are aspects that are similar to elsewhere. I mean, at the LSBU group, we've got somewhere in the region of 10 to 15,000 sponsored students, and we've certainly seen a drop-off of part-time registration for courses where those students are or were intended to be sponsored, with a lot of employers saying that they're now looking to next calendar year. That's being compensated for by a growth in full-time provision, but that then leads to complexity below university level with some of the funding streams, the complexity of that funding, as we heard in the first part. So I think there is definitely a picture which is national around people already stepping away from some of the commitments to training. You know, as a little story, we had 14 students at our technical college due to start apprenticeships at age 18. They all had their apprenticeships withdrawn, which is one of the reasons we moved into a year 14, if you like, a third year to the sixth form, to enable them to continue with their education and move into year 2 of degree programmes. Locally, when you walk around London, what really stands out at the moment is the impact, I think, on the service industry. We do get a lot of people coming into London to work, and that drives a lot of hospitality and smaller businesses. That worry about transport and that lack of influx is having, I think, quite a significant issue in terms of the way in which London's operating. It's a lot quieter. And what we're also then seeing because of that, I think, is a change in the way SMEs are working. Micro businesses. We have an innovation park at the university, which is one of the top 15 in Europe, and we specialise in micro business and SME engagement. A lot of those businesses are looking at working differently post-COVID. They no longer want permanent space. They want to look at more business lounge approaches and the way in which they can work more flexibly, both with our educational providers, but also with their teams. And I think that will drive quite a significant change in the future in terms of how employers operate. I'll stop there because I'm aware of time, Anthony. I could go on.
No worries. Thank you very much for those thoughts, David. We are really up against it in terms of time. Just to kind of wrap this session up. I mean, we been some fantastic insights from you all, but I'm just after kind of one soundbite from each of you in terms of, you know, what one piece of practical advice would you give to an employer, any of the employers that are listening now, to the millions of people that will be listening to this on playback? What one piece of advice would you give to those employers who want to make a difference and really kind of change the skills in their local area? Maybe if I can come to you, David, and I'll kind of go in reverse order. So, David, your one piece of advice, a soundbite would be much appreciated.
When things get tight, innovation and investment in people becomes more, not less important. So look to the future and look to how you develop your teams to cope with that future.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Gary?
I would say that we've got to answer the so what question. So what are we trying to fix? What are the problems? Recognizing that people are individuals and we need to make sure that they have transferable skills. And if I could just very quickly say, equal emphasis on behaviours as well as skills.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I think that might have been 1.5 points, slightly cheating, but I'll allow it. Thank you, Gary. Martin?
I think, to sum up, that every single opportunity counts. So it doesn't matter about the scale of your business. It doesn't matter about how many opportunities you have. If you have one opportunity, it contributes to fixing the problem.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Last but not least, Claire.
So I'd say build an ecosystem around your business that focuses on employment, skills, and inclusion. Leverage your local business chamber. They have brilliant relationships, and also to build on the last point of David, which was to say that the GM Chamber has become a gateway for the Kickstart programme. So 30 people usually hired to join that Kickstart programme, but as the Chamber has established a series of businesses now within our network have come and said, we've got an opportunity for 1 or 2 people. Can you help us bridge into the Kickstart programme? And so we're supporting 61 companies now with circa 200 placements. So that's the key point. Every little helps.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Claire. And I spotted the plug for the Manchester Chambers there. Completely shameless, but I like it. Thank you very much to all my panelists today. I kind of come away from this panel, feeling optimistic that, we might be facing these once in a generation challenges, but that actually, businesses of all shapes and sizes are really doing a lot and really stepping up to the challenge ahead of us. So thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Kirstie.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for yet again another brilliant panel. That's 2 great panels we've already had this morning, and I've got the task now of sort of trying to keep us on track and in literally 12 minutes flat try and now just introduce the report we've been talking about, but it's already been much talked about. I mean, I love those sound bites, by the way, Anthony and panelists. I mean, I think what I took away from that is employers need to keep looking up, the whole system needs to keep looking up and looking forward. This is about having a growth mindset, not a deficit mindset. And of course, that was one of the things we did mention in our report. So let's just move rapidly through now and have a look at some of the highlights. You will see in the chat in a moment, there will be a link come for you to download the report. We also get the report to you out in a number of ways. But if I can just put up my first slide, really, that just runs through the top key 5 themes. There are many others in the report, but these were the top 5 that I want to just focus on this morning very briefly. And to be honest, we've already talked to them in both of the panels we've heard today. This is not a one-size-fits-all situation. We mustn't forget about those older workers. we need to create a safety net for people who've established careers or jobs and find themselves unemployed, and also the contribution they can make to economic recovery. Again, this sort of one size doesn't fit all. This, the fact that training solutions need to be flexible to meet the needs of the local economy. We heard even from the Minister earlier about recognition about the important link of careers advice and guidance needed for all ages. And of course, this opportunity to create even better support and aspiration for low earners, low skilled people into those higher level opportunities. So that's a very rapid look at the actual key themes. Let's now just have a quick rapid look equally at the main recommendations. So all in all, there were about 8 actual recommendations in the end. I think a colleague of ours said earlier that there's 10. I mean, I think it depends how you conflate them, but I'm just going to focus on 4 that again, you could read the detail in the report. I think this is really important given the things we've talked about this morning. Take the learning to the people. Let's broaden the scope of where learning and training can happen. We recognise the opportunity now for digital at scale, for bite-sized flexible learning that will better cater perhaps for those older workers. Focus on short, sharp interventions to help people back into work. We can't just rely on longer college-based courses. We need to recognise that, as we saw from the video right at the beginning, this is about the skills bridges that will help people transition from one industry to another. Push ahead with the devolution agenda. We've heard a lot about this today. Otherwise, we really will risk actually levelling down regions. And let's put more autonomy back into LEPs and MCAs so that they can actually choose the best skills policies that suit their local needs and greater access to skills funding. We heard before, I think from Michelle, about augmenting the funding, having a longer term funding settlement. I think they're all part of the mix of what we were also recommending. So look, what do we do about it? What does that mean in terms of a solution? And I'm just going to sort of finish briefly now and talk to you about the main proposition that's in the report, really. And the fundamental basis of our now report is about directing existing government resources and funding into tangible actions that can then be deployed at local and regional interventions, as well as augmenting what is already available. This is not about reinventing the wheel, but it's about working with what's already on the ground and up and running, but providing greater coherence and linkage between skills and jobs, supply and demand. This diagram you can see very clearly here and is in the report itself is really a key feature of the proposal, which is a network of national employment and training hubs based in regions and locations of most need, even on the high street, as well as, of course, being available in the hands of users happy to access services online, on their devices, on smartphones. In a nutshell, you might say employment and training hubs are about taking people to the jobs, and the jobs, i.e. the employers, directly to the people, a shop window for skills and jobs, you might say. And they'll provide one-stop training and employment matching service, a rapid ability to diagnose adults' transferable skills and where the development needs might be, and then gap fill those with short, sharp interventions. We're calling these skills bridges, helping adults or people transition from one industry into another. And of course, continuing to access training and upskilling for those most at risk of displacement from their current roles. And then, of course, as we were just talking about in a moment ago, keeping that training focused on improving business productivity. So whilst these hubs are designed to deal with the more immediate and urgent need of tackling unemployment now and supporting COVID recovery, we see them as very much being part of a much needed and long missed skills infrastructure for future growth. It's probably worth noting we've already submitted an ask into the Chancellor's Comprehensive Spending Review to convene and get these employment training hubs up and running. And we can do this because there is already provision on the ground in regions to tap into and converge and augment funding. That's a very rapid tour through the main highlights that are in the report. As I said, the link to the report should be in your chat. If not, we can always put a slide up. There it is now for you to be able to see the hashtag #ActNow for you to download. So what I'm going to do now is ask Anne to come back and join me. I see she's back on camera. And really, I suppose, start to draw to an end what has been a fantastic and fascinating conversation this morning, Anne, on singly what is probably, outside of actually finding a cure or rather a vaccine for COVID, most important issue that this nation faces, which is helping get the economy back up and running, and importantly, helping individuals with their livelihoods and getting back into work. So I suppose, really a last reflection from you. I mean, having heard everything you've heard today, including from the Minister at the beginning, how confident are you feeling about the momentum needed to make all this happen? And are you feeling confident that government are listening or will listen?
I think a couple of things first, to thank Sitting Guilds for putting this on. And I think that the reason to be optimistic is there's no lack of enthusiasm from all the people on the panels. And I think there's no lack of ideas. As the Minister said, this is hard to fix, and how do we get there? So everybody knows where we want to go. They're just not terribly sure of the best means of getting there. And for government, that is also about making sure that taxpayers' money is used wisely. The danger is for government that it worries very much about that. And so often the bureaucracy it sets up is overburdensome and actually becomes a barrier. I think the key word from your solution is shop window. And that's what's needed. There are people who will be caught through the DWP processes and systems. But there are thousands of people out there worried about their job, not sure what to do, for whom the idea of learning is not necessarily something they thought of. So there has to be a shop window where people can wander in and say, you know, I'm not terribly sure what's going to happen to my job. Because actually we have to catch these people before they fall too low. And we've heard from employers that they need people with skills, but we've been hearing from employers for the last 20 years that they need to upskill the workforce, and they're not terribly sure how to do it. So that bridge, I think, is critical. So the optimism is no shortage of goodwill. The most important thing is now is a call for government really to be brave. No need to reinvent things. There are lots of things sitting on the shelf, some of them which will have been gone through one cycle, maybe two. You've got lots of ideas there. Now is the time to implement it, and soon.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Anne. And I think hopefully, and thank you for your involvement, of course, in the work that led to the ACTNOW report. So it's probably a bit of a rather leading question to sort of suggest, so what we have tried to create there is exactly what you've just summarised, really, an opportunity to take great ideas, innovation that's already happening, but to kind of converge and augment it into a coherent picture, which is probably what we have been missing from what's come out of government so far today. So listen, thanks again. Thanks. We had our roadshows, Anne, and they may be over for the season, but I feel our journey has probably only just begun, actually. And a challenging, exciting one, but a very important one it's going to be. So again, everybody, please don't forget to download your report. And just to say thank you, huge thanks again to all of our panelists and speakers. We don't have time to play those case studies that you saw as you joined this morning. We will send you out the clip because I think it's really important that we do remind ourselves that this is about real people having to live out their very real lives against the backdrop of a COVID reality and all the issues and challenges that brings. So that's why we're all working so hard across the sector and with employers too, so that we can all do more faster to act now and try and not let down the futures of so many individuals, let alone our economy. Thank you, everybody. Good luck, be well, and bye for now. Thanks for being with us.